Good evening and welcome to the May 16th, 2022 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Stephen Spur and I am chairman of the Summit Zoning Board. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and also broadcast on Summit's government channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. Please note that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it after the meeting. Andy Ball is the zoning board's attorney. He will advise board members on matters of law and is the key interface with an applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball does not vote on the applications. Chris Nicola is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. Mr. Nicola assists applicants with the preparation of their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. Mr. Nicola also does not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearing tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Some applications require 5 affirmative votes to be approved. You'll be told which majority will be required before we begin our deliberations. Mr. Nicola, will you please call the roll of the members?
Sure. Chairman Spur?
Here.
Vice Chairman Steiner?
Here.
Mr. Yuko?
Here.
Mr. Mullen?
Here.
Ms. Newell?
Here.
Mr. Millay?
Here.
Mr. Loikich?
Here.
Ms. Toth?
Here.
Ms. Sager?
Here.
Dr. Levine is excused, and Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
All right, you have a quorum, you can proceed, but before you do, I would note that Mr. Yuko, Mr. Millay, and Mr. Steiner have all read the transcript and are eligible to vote.
Okay, thank you very much. We generally hear the applications in the order they are listed on the agenda. We try to have each hearing last no more than 30 minutes. That will be difficult, if not already passed for this application. We do understand that some applications are too complex to be heard within that time frame. Each hearing begins with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the variances that are required. We then hear from any expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain the application and why variances are needed. The board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and the expert witnesses. Once board professionals and board members have completed their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about this application. That opportunity comes at the end of the hearing. Before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It is important our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record. The court reporting is done over the audio and visual system, the video recording, so please do use the microphones if you can. After all witnesses have been heard, members of the interested public have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed and we enter into executive session where board members discuss the application and vote. You'll be able to listen to our executive session, but you will not normally be able to participate in our discussion. Most applications are heard and decided in the same evening. If an application requires additional information or testimony that cannot be presented tonight, we will carry the application to another date, and it will not be decided during this meeting. Krista Anderson, the city's zoning officer, has asked that I remind all applicants that they must carefully read the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and to pay particular attention to the conditions contained in the resolution. For example, if a landscaping plan is required, you must obtain one and submit it to John Linson, the city's forester. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering division. Failure to satisfy all conditions in a resolution will result in a delay in approving your application, as it will necessitate additional follow-up from zoning and other city staff. The resolutions documenting the board's decision will normally be available 1 month after we decide the application. The only application on the agenda for this evening is STMB Properties LLC, 557565 Morse Avenue. Before we begin, we're going to pause for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we can kick off there. What do you want me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. James Weber of Alfonso & Weber on behalf of the applicant, STMB Properties LLC. I have the principals with me, Kieran and Kevin Flanagan, and they have been previously sworn in and have testified before the board. This is the second hearing. The board had heard this originally on March 17th. If you recall, that was at the community center, and we walked through the testimony and of preliminary basis of Mr. and Mr. Flanagan, and then we went through the architect's testimony. The board was kind enough at that point, as well as the interested public and the board professionals, to provide their input with regard to the plans. The plans have been revised in response to those comments. And in that regard, if I could have brought up the engineering plan, please, Ms. Alfonso. That also reminds me, Samantha Alfonso, Esquire of Alfonso and Weber, is also here on behalf of the applicants. With regard to the changes, perhaps the more significant from the adjoining property owner, Nick Manoia, who is not here and is no longer taking a position with regard to this application, and likewise his attorney has indicated he will not be appearing. With regard to that, the plans have been revised in order to move the driveway serving Turcano Park more to the north. What we're looking at here is one of the perspectives that has been prepared by Studio 1200. This is consistent with the demonstration of the massing along Morris Avenue. While we await the engineering plan, and there is a highlighted or a rendered perspective of that plan. While Ms. Alfonso is gathering that information, you'll also see that the Summit Police Department, who had originally commented that they did not like the fact that the driveway was so close to the established promenade driveway, has also indicated in their more recent report, and that's dated April 11th, no objections, driveway redesign appears to be acceptable. Likewise, this is also subject to the county, and our understanding of the county is that they have not responded yet, or they have responded. So I'm indicating that they have not yet responded to our plan. With regard to the conversations with regard to the rear yard landscaping buffer, there was the opportunity of Mr. Flanagan to speak with one of the neighbors. One of the neighbors said, we appreciate the plantings, but we don't want the open fence. We prefer a board-on-board fence. So a board-on-board fence is now proposed along the rear lot line to enhance the landscaping. With regard to the additional changes that have been prepared, there's increased landscaping along Morris Avenue in response to the request of one of the board reports. And then in terms of the, if we can go to the architectural plan, is that possible? And there we'll see the roof plan, and with regard to the roof plan.
Mr. Weber, would you mind bringing the microphone a little closer to you? I received a note from someone at home saying they couldn't hear you quite clearly. Thank you.
That with regard to the roof plan, while we're waiting for that to come up, there's been the ability for the stair towers, which constituted, I think, around 540 square feet, that were at 15 feet. And if you recall that the height of the appurtenant structures, the bulkheads, is limited at 8 feet. And at this point, in order to have that access to the roof, we need the variances for those bulkheads. That amount of square footage at 15 feet has been reduced by the architects down to 100 square feet. So the comments that have been made have been heard by the applicants and by their experts, and they've really made sure that they address those and eliminated to the extent they can the concerns. I must indicate that Mr. Dewar has reviewed the engineering plans, and in reviewing the engineering plans, it's not working.
Yeah, it's not you, it's the mic, I think.
Can you use the one
Maybe
from the
try
other
that
side?
one. Sorry.
Does this work?
We can hear that here, yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Weber.
With regard to Mr. Dewar's astute review of the plans, he has picked up that the steep slopes, and the steep slopes are alongside the furthest north lot as they adjoin the property that immediately sits on River Road, and has concluded that we have 1,250 square feet of steep slopes, and you're allowed an exception of 1,000 square feet. So we need a variance for the steep slopes of 250 square feet. In terms of the report of Krista Anderson, she had indicated that the signage of the emblem for Turcano Park exceeds the 30 inches, and that is going to be brought into compliance. So that variance will not exist, and we're not asking for any relief with regard to that. Anything with regard to signage will be compliant. With regard to the comments of the planner, with regard to the distribution of the COA units, they have now been distributed throughout Turcano Park and throughout the building as requested. I'm reviewing the additional comments in my head, if you just bear with me. Other than those, I would have the Flanagans be called back to the stand in order to go over the operational comments that had been the board's focus. And with regard to that, we have an outline of those statements. So while Mr. and Mr. Flanagan are testifying with regard to that, I would ask Ms. Alfonso if she would put that up on the screen so that the board can follow those operational statements. So we have the detailed in writing and followed up with the testimony. So I'd ask that Mr. Flanagan be recalled to the stand to give testimony in that regard.
There's a switch on that mic. I'm gonna go check it.
Okay. I'm going to dispatch our audio-visual help here to see if we can get that microphone working.
Who's ever testifying? If it's just going to be you, Kieran, then that will suffice. Mr. Flanagan, were you sworn in at the last hearing?
Yes.
You can stand up
Worth
now.
your weight in gold, Joe. Thank you. One moment, Mr. Flanagan.
First line of tech support, right?
Well done.
Mr. Flanagan, at the last hearing, the board members had asked for further elaboration of how Turcano Park is going to operate. They broke that down as far as how the stacked parking is going to work, how lighting is going to work, and how the amenities are going to be addressed in regard to what is proposed before them. And now, as part of this Turcano Park Memorandum Operational Guidelines, it starts off by indicating that the DRO provides that automatic or semi-automatic stacked parking shall be permitted in multifamily buildings. And they leave that, though, with standards. And the standards are consideration of the total number of required and provided parking spaces, facility, operation, procedure and duration of time to drop off, retrieve vehicles, and facility access. And if you look at the bottom of that citation that's up on the screen, you see that there's a number 1. Then it goes through. We have number 2, stacked parking, fully enclosed, meet building codes. Number 3, you don't need hairpin striping, but you still have to be able to accommodate consumer vehicles. And number 4, compliance with ADA. And number 5, that you have to be consistent with the overall design of the building and the design requirements and guidelines set forth in the DRO. So, Mr. Flanagan, having listened to me walk through the beginning of that, would you begin at the bottom of page 1 and talk about how this proposal accords with number 1 with regard to the stacked parking?
Well, I don't know. It is, we are going to have stacked parking in the building. We are going to have, total number of spaces required is 97, and we are providing 138 spots. The stacked parking will be operated by a trained valet, 24 hours, 7 days a week. In the event of a power outage, stacked parking will drop to grade, providing access to vehicles. Procedure is consistent with established valet parking for drop-off. Residents will pull up to the turning circle under the cover and exit the vehicle, give the keys to the valet, and the valet will then store the vehicles downstairs. The residents, for the residents, the duration is less time than parking the vehicles themselves. They'll be able to pick up the, for pickup, they'll call ahead to the valet and come to the reception circle and get their vehicle. Valet will retrieve the keys from the valet office engaged in the stacked parking, enter the car, and deliver it to the covered circle. Duration would be comparable to a resident retrieving the vehicles themselves. Valets will use internal staircase and elevator to get up and down from the garage. There will be a period of time as the staff and residents get accustomed to the process. During that time, it's expected that there will be some waiting periods while the valet retrieves the vehicles. However, once everybody's settled in, the system will proceed smoothly, and the residents become, it'll become most convenient to the residents.
Mr. Flanagan, I'm sorry for interrupting, but you've managed this type of process before, haven't you?
Yes, yeah.
So when this is talking about what's the period of time for everyone to be accustomed to it, how long is that usually?
I mean, it's less than 5 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
And do you find that the residents appreciate the valet?
Yeah, it's a very nice amenity for the type of clientele that we are trying to get into our building.
So I apologize for interrupting. Then if you would continue with the fact that 2 parking spaces have been reserved for valet parking only?
Correct. Up top, we'll have 2 valet parking only spots, and they'll be for those kind of last minute things or for the valet to stage if somebody's really hot for their car. They have to.
It states here that if the board approves the application, would be requested that the number of valet parking only spaces be susceptible to change as circumstances require, but in no case less than 2.
Correct.
We're going to now, Mr. Chairman, move on to the rooftop amenities, but there may be additional questions at this point with regard to the stacked parking. Perhaps we can talk to those questions now, if that's appropriate.
I have a couple questions about the parking, if that's okay. You know, our police department is very diligent about sending out text alerts every time a car gets stolen in Summit. And I'm just wondering, is there any in your experience, is there any added risk with having all these keys in a central location in a valet service? Like, what's the security for the keys? How are they controlled? Have there been attempts at your other places with this to access the keys?
No, all the keys are kept in a lock box. We have a separate room downstairs for the valet, and I think, if anything, this place will be even safer because you have to know how to operate the stackers.
So it's not been a problem, as far as you know, in any other buildings where you've had this kind of parking where cars have been stolen?
No, we haven't had any cars stolen from our lots in years and years.
And I guess this next question, not just for parking, but I guess all the amenities. Will the co-tenants have equal access to all the amenities in the building as other tenants do?
That's correct.
Okay, and I guess that's all for now. I'll have some other questions later on, but that's all for now.
I have a
Thank you.
question about parking. You mentioned something about when there's a power outage, but I didn't quite catch what happens when there's a power outage.
So when there's a power outage, the stacker is still lower. if you want them to. So you can
How?
still get the cars out,
How?
because they're hydraulic. So they're electric going up, they're hydraulic basically coming down.
Okay.
I have a question. Do you have issues with motorcycles with parking? Do you give priority to them? And also, would you give priority to anyone who works for like emergency response, like if they're on SWAT or anything?
We have not thought about the emergency response, but we would make accommodations for that and for motorcycles. Sure.
Jim, Karen, you mentioned that since you're adding so many additional parking above and beyond what is required and what you think is going to be necessary for the 52 units, you think you're actually going to be able to fit one car for almost every unit on the first floor?
That's correct.
So even if they don't have something special for first responders, they can certainly make sure that first responders have a surface first floor stack
Yeah.
spot so that they can get out easily.
That's correct.
Sure.
Is there going to be, excuse me, is there going to be an additional charge for parking for residents?
Yes. Their primary parking spot will be included in the rent, and then any secondary or third spots that they need in the stackers will be an extra cost.
Okay, so there'll be one rent per unit and no additional
Correct.
cost,
Yep,
regardless of COA status or market rate status.
correct.
Well, so just so I'm clear then, so a co-attendant gets the one parking spot included in their rent. Additional spots, would they pay the same amount as non-co-attendants, or would they get also an affordability break on the parking?
I haven't thought that through, but yeah, we would probably prorate it the same way.
If the board approves this application, that would be suggested as a condition of
Yeah.
approval.
Yep.
And I would ask that Mr. Flanagan confirm that.
We would confirm that, yep.
Yeah, maybe I missed this, but how does this stacker work? It's three cars up, and I'm envisioning it coming down and having three squashed cars. That's not, I think, what we're planning to do here. How does a stacker work?
So there's stops in the posts, there's 4 posts. It's a lot like an elevator, so it goes up, it has a stop at the top, so you can't keep going up and hitting the roof, the ceiling. And so each tier has limits. That's for the height and how low it can go. And not until the lowest bar is out and that lowest plate is all the way down on the ground, that will it allow the other cars to come down.
So in a power failure, and I'm on the third stack, I'm staying in.
No, you can manually override the stops in this situation of a power outage.
Okay. I'm assuming we're going to have more testimony on how these all work from the engineering department, so,
Yeah, but they are hydraulic, and that's the way they work.
okay.
Pull the bottom car out, and then you take the
Correct.
cars down, and then the
Once-
second car.
Yeah, once that plate goes down, it triggers the stop. It allows the next one to go down.
But in a power outage, you
Triggers
can get your
stop.
car out, but you can't get it back in.
Correct. You can't get it back in.
Well, if you can get it back into the lowest space.
You can get one back in, you can get
Yes.
39 cars in, but no more. You can
Yes,
get
if
them all
that's the
out.
number, correct.
You can get them all out, but you can get 39
Get
in.
them all out. Yeah,
And if you're fully occupied with everything and we have a power failure and all the top guys want out, we've got excess cars.
At that point, if we were dealing, and we'll have testimony with regard to this, but
Okay.
at that point, if you're dealing with a power outage, then you're dealing with an emergent circumstance probably affecting the city. At that point, everyone's car can be removed so that they can gain access to it. We then have the 39 stacked parking.
yeah.
Plus, I think there's 3 others. I think there's 42, and then you have 15 on top. So at that point, you're talking about 57 surface parking. And then you have all the aisles with the valets. So to the extent that you're dealing with an emergency and you have this power outage, then at that point, circumstances will dictate how it's managed.
And again, you'd be able to take out everyone's first car.
Absolutely, yep.
The only question that I had about the parking was just if you can quickly talk the board and the public through ADA compliance, just to reassure us how, for both residents, potentially visitors, this parking plan as presented here today can accommodate the ADA requirements.
We would have the expert address that, if you would, Mr. Chairman. And in speaking to Mr. Vice Chairman, this is the person who's familiar with stacked parking, has it in other buildings that he operates.
Yep.
And so he has the hands-on. If you need additional testimony with regard to that, then perhaps the architect can address it, but it's really going to be something here where Mr. Flanagan himself has managed properties with the stacked parking.
These are the same lifts that we use in all our garages.
Is there any other location in Summit that uses this system?
Well, I think, I don't know the address.
Yeah, it's
The Beacon.
Mr. Yeager's development over
Beacon?
on Summit
Yeah,
Avenue.
The Beacon,
Beacon,
Yeah.
Beacon?
which we approved.
Which was a case before this board. You can go back and watch the videos.
I got one more question.
Okay.
In terms of the way the spaces are allocated, if you have a unit that would have multiple cars, as I imagine you would with all the parking you have, is that single unit going to have multiple cars on a single stacker? Is that how you would do it?
no, we wouldn't likely do that. It's going to be, we're going to talk to the tenants on how much they're going to use their second and third cars, and that's going to probably dictate where we put those cars themselves. But we wouldn't do it like a garage where they're all stacked together. We might be able to accommodate that, but we might not be able to accommodate that.
So one of the notes I had on potential conditions was that, and we might get a little more information about the ADA compliance later, but just to address it from the get-go, that valet parking would be maintained as a condition of the application to ensure that any, ADA parking continues in the future. Would that be an issue?
That would not be an issue.
I have another question. How much maintenance does having hydraulic stacking units usually require? So would you have to shut down, I don't know, like 5 at a time in order to like clean out hydraulic systems or recharge them? I don't really know exactly like what the maintenance procedures are, but how would that work? Do you have to do that? Do you not have to do that? Is there like an environmental impact we should consider, like hydraulic spillage?
Oh, no, it's not, there wouldn't be an environmental issue. It's a fully self-contained system within the posts, and they, especially because this is a 4-post system, the amount of maintenance is minimal.
Which
It's
would be
very little.
like daily?
You
Weekly,
probably,
monthly, yearly?
oh, no, it would probably be, every 6 months an inspection. That's really about it. These things last forever.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for parking for this witness? We'll hear more parking later. Otherwise, I think to the dog run on the roof. Oh, sorry. Yep, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions. Regarding the stacked parking, particularly for the COA units, would there be a charge for their parking spaces to use the stacked parking?
No, not an additional charge. Everybody's getting one spot.
Yeah, I'm not trying to set you up on a question. I'm just trying to say that I think that might have to be something that you don't charge for because their rents are specifically established by the regional regulations. In addition to that, also if you have a 3-bedroom, normally would be, I think it's 2.3 or 2.5 parking spaces per unit. They may need to be available. I know you had mentioned a moment ago that the extra spaces, one will be provided for each unit, but that the additional spaces, that might be something, I'm not sure if we're going to conclude tonight or something for research, is find out whether or not they have to also be available to the COA units, because they may have 2 cars, for instance.
Which was your question, Tom,
Yes,
right?
just to clarify, so when I asked the question earlier, they testified that they would give the second space, not at the full price, but at a reduced price. You're saying they may not be able to charge the co-tenant at all?
Because what's also established by the COA rents is the cost of utilities, and I would imagine even some association fees associated with the overall building. So we've been using the amenities. So that's something that I asked Mr. Burgess in my office today, how they're dealing with it in other vicinages, and he was going to talk to Fair Share Housing Center to see how they've heard of it,
So I think we'll need to know that, obviously.
That's one of the things I wanted to advise the board on.
Okay.
Well, certainly, and if the board approves the application, you would agree to be compliant with the ADA, or with the COA regulations and
Yeah, that's
recommendations
correct.
with regard to that percentage. So I think what Mr. Flanagan was addressing is that he said, we'll do it proportionally, and that proportionality for the additional parking spaces would be one of those issues that would be capable of being determined in the discussions with fair share housing. So I would ask if the board approves the application to include that as a condition.
And I think it's safe to say the COA requirements are all set forth at regulations. We couldn't override them even if we wanted to, so certainly the applicant would have to comply with them.
Right.
But we can note that as a condition as well.
Very good.
You also mentioned that you were going to have a generator at the facility. Would that help with possibly these lifts as well, the emergency generator?
The generator is really for life safety. I mean, we could hook a generator up, but there's so few power outages, and then they're usually not that prolonged.
Are you familiar with Summit?
I don't know. He's on the good, we're on the good side of town.
I knew that you were going to have a generator, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. No further questions.
Carried anything? No?
I was going to ask the generator question, so that's, no, that's fine, it covers everything, that's great.
All right, Mr. Weber, you can proceed to the next question.
And we then go on to rooftop amenities. So Mr. Flanagan, in the Connell Park operational guidelines, it indicates that there's several rooftop amenities: outdoor seating, whether it's open under the pergola, cooking grills, and the dog run. And then with regard to that, it indicates that the activity can be no later than 10 o'clock and can even be earlier if the management decides to restrict it and make it earlier than 10 o'clock. And likewise, the access to the roof will not be earlier than 7.
That's correct.
And then when we talk about, let's see now, so on the rooftop amenities, and then we move right on to lighting. So that was the time set for the access to those amenities. Then we're moving on to lighting, and after that, cooking grills, and then the dog run. Should we just continue through, or any questions with regard to the
Pause on
timing?
Dog run for a moment. So sorry, just restate the rooftop access. I heard 7 a.m. is the earliest with which dogs that are impatiently trying to relieve themselves could access the dog run?
Correct.
Okay. In the meantime, they would be able to utilize some space in the exterior of the property at the ground floor, I presume?
If the dog has to go out before 7,
In that odd case, right?
then
if
you're
dogs
on the
don't wait.
sidewalk, I imagine.
Yeah, they
Or
go
let-
outside.
Is there a space dedicated to on the ground floor? We can visit it in other
Over your
testimony.
detention basin?
There's some grass in the back.
Okay.
Mr. Worry, who's the, after Ms. Dar, the architect, will be responding to her changes, then he's a civil engineer, and I just asked him to consider whether or not the area over one of the retention basins
Dog
underground.
waste disposal expert, I believe is his official title, right?
Right. Mr. Worry,
Thank you,
consider
Mr.
whether or not that works.
Okay.
I had a question on the hours of operation for the dog run in particular. 10 o'clock at night seems a little, I mean, if you're taking a dog out, that's one thing. If you're having many dogs playing on a dog run, 10 o'clock, it might get a little noisy in the residential area. Do you consider
Well,
maybe
one of
something a
the-
little earlier?
Let's go to the dog run. If
Okay.
there's no other questions about the general roof access, and so we're all set on the time, now we're focused on the dog run. Perhaps we can just go to the dog run at this point. So I'd ask you to go to, oh, thank you, Ms. Alfonso. So let's talk about that. The access to the dog run must be by scheduled appointment. So subject, of course, to emergencies. So if somebody's dog really has to go. But once a schedule is established and the wrinkles ironed out, then there will be a limit established as to the number of dogs permitted at any one time. In conversations with established boarding facilities, the appropriate number at any one time would be a maximum of 5 dogs. Now that's a boarding facility. The board certainly has the discretion to address it otherwise. There's a waste receptacle, will be addressed daily. Residents will be required to attend to their dogs or forfeit use of the dog run. Is that all correct, Mr. Flanagan?
Yes, that's correct.
Questions about the dog run?
Yeah, I have a couple. So, and I did listen to the past hearings, and some of this might have been addressed peripherally, but I want to, kind of maybe hear it for myself. I'm not sure we've ever addressed a situation with a dedicated dog area on a roof. Maybe we have, I just don't remember. I have lots of concerns about it in terms of noise, and multiple dogs playing on a rooftop. So let me ask the direct question. How high is the fence around this dog area?
That's a great question, and it's one of the amendments that the architect has made, and I believe we're at 6 feet. And we're going to be calling Nancy Doherty, and she'll confirm that it's up to 6 feet, screened on 2 sides.
Okay, so 6 feet, that's hard, I was hoping something in that range. I could see dogs trying to get away and jumping over fences.
And Mr. Yuko, this is the same question that was raised with Mr. Flanagan and the applicant by his attorneys, saying, okay, we're putting a dog run on the roof, and Mr. Flanagan said this is an amenity that people actually like. So I would ask him to describe for the board why we're putting why a dog run's being put on the roof.
Well, let me ask one specific question, which maybe you can address. I mean, I live in a townhouse community in Summit. We're all on the ground. We don't have any rooftop dog runs. But we have rules about, I don't think, about size and also certain breeds that can't be owned on the, can't be in the units on our property. Would you contemplate anything like this, like maybe, owning small dogs on the roof, or, dogs that aren't likely to jump, or, anything like that?
Yeah, we would definitely consider that. I will say that our objective here is to provide an amenity to our people that are going to be renting with us, but we are not going to let it get out of control. I understand it's a nuisance, but it's actually an amenity that a lot of people love, and I happen to be building other apartment buildings throughout the country, and this is an amenity that people really love.
But would you
But it has to be managed, so that's why it really is going to be a scheduled, you have a slot. You go up there. If you don't use it, you can't necessarily go up there at any time and just let your dog go crazy up there.
Like I said, in my community, we have a list of, 8 or 10 specific breeds which are permitted for unit owners. And I think it's based on our insurance carrier. I'm not 100% sure that. I think it might be. Would you consider anything like that? Like, I hate to brand the whole breed as being dangerous, but certain breeds are viewed as more dangerous than others. Would you consider something like that?
Absolutely, yeah.
This is a very common amenity in New York City.
Is it really?
Yes, and it's starting to become commonplace in Jersey City, Newark, as those cities start to build these mixed-use or multifamily types of buildings. So it's something that's extremely commonplace.
I'm familiar with the same thing in Nashville, where my son has lived
Yes.
for a few years.
Same
He has
thing with
a
the
do- he
stacked
has-
parking too.
yeah.
This is extremely commonplace in these type of buildings.
We are talking about high-density urban centers as
Yes,
opposed to
that's right.
Summit, New Jersey.
That's right.
Well, but we've already agreed we could put toddlers on the roof.
Well, they don't jump
don't
too
jump
high.
as much.
Right, yeah. Okay. There may be some more technical questions about I could think perhaps the disposal of solid versus liquid waste in these dog runs that may be interesting to explore. I don't know if this witness would like to speak to it, or the engineer.
If he can.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have a maintenance person there
Okay.
regularly, and there's also a service, which I don't know if you know, but there actually is, there's a maintenance service that actually takes care of all these, hoses them down, cleans them all out, but there will be waste receptacle bags and the receptacle itself.
I can't speak to this whatsoever. Is there a relevant health code that deals with disposal of waste that would regulate this? Again, both the solid waste, which you would hope be put in the receptacle, and the liquid waste that I presume, and wow, this is all captured on video, is I assume draining in some capacity to some location?
Yeah, there's basically drains underneath, a network of drains.
And some kind of wash, some kind
Yeah,
of
there's a
spray
hose,
or
hose station, that's exactly it, a
That'll be
hose
part of the
station.
maintenance protocol?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So there is
Anything you guys want to add to this? Otherwise, I'll take all the hard
I
questions.
know, we talked about, because I've worked on some in Hoboken, and they have a special turf for the dogs. And it's, as you noted, if there's an under drain system, it's graded to a central drain, so it goes down into the, connected to the sewer system. As far as the solid waste, that is going to be maintained by the management company or by a service.
I would think the applicant's incentivized to keep the rooftop amenities clean.
I've just got this nightmare scenario of odor wafting off of the roof into the neighboring properties. I don't want to be
Well,
responsible for that.
residual stuff going down the side in front of my Juliet balcony.
Sure. That's right. All right.
Well, it's
The
well
ones that
inside,
I've seen-
it's well inside.
The ones that I've seen work very well and are actually they're useful, they're not unattractive, they are well used, and people like them.
I have a question.
And dogs do too.
And dogs do too.
Yeah, people on
Go ahead,
dogs.
Liz. Yep.
You said you had, everyone will have a slot. So is there someone that's going to be checking them in when they go up to the roof, or like just the honor system?
Yeah, it's an honor system. But as I said, we're going to have a maintenance person and a manager on site, and they're going to manage it.
So specifically for the roof, so just to manage how many dogs are there. So there's going to be one
Correct.
person. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Do you,
Well,
do
I just
you
want to
distinguish?
make sure that we're clear, if I can, Ms. Newell, Ms. Sager. So you're going to have a manager on site, how often? 24/7?
No, not a manager on site 24/7, but there'll be a person on site 24/7.
All right.
And that'll be the valets, but there'll be porters and managers on site.
Okay, so
during the
there will
day.
be an operational person on site
Correct.
24/7?
Yep.
And then that one person's not going to be dedicated to the dog run
No.
during the day?
No.
So I wanted
No,
to make
not
it
just
clear.
the dog
When-
run,
when
but
you
they'll be
talk
managing the
about-
building.
When you talk about a set appointment scheduled, are you distinguishing between the dog run and just kind of the relief area? So for example, if somebody leaves for work at 6:45 every morning and they run their dog up for a quick relief break for 5 minutes before they leave for work, but don't have them run in the dog run, and then they take them back down, put them in their apartment and leave for work, is that an appointment?
No. We're probably going to have, just like the valet, we're going to have some buffer time
Okay.
in the morning, because everybody's going to probably want to do the same thing. But we are going to try to still get that down to slots, because we don't want 20 dogs up there at the same time. Even if there's just quick reliefs, that people are going to, and again, it is going to be an honor system and something that we're going to manage. But even the dog, it's designed
But not
as a
everybody has a
convenience.
dog, and
Yeah,
not everybody
not
goes to work
everybody.
at the same
Correct.
time, and,
Yeah. And also, it's not a substitute for really walking your dog. I mean,
Right.
the dog can get a little bit of exercise up there, but it's not like a football field.
You mentioned you develop these around the country. Do you own and manage them, or have you just built them and sold them to third parties?
We manage, that's not for me and my brother. This is another company that I work with, that we build and manage them.
Okay, and is it your intent to own this after you've developed it and have a third-party manager here? Or will it be your own company?
Oh, this will be our own company. This is, our plan is to hold this, for a long, long time.
Okay. And about how many units do you manage nationally?
Right now, there's about 270 being managed right now.
270 buildings?
No units.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dog run questions. We got deviated here. Sorry.
Are there any other animals that are permitted in Summit that would, perhaps somebody, cats don't use these, but any other animals that are permitted in Summit that somebody might need to use this for, and how would you accommodate?
This
And I
is-
don't know
This
how
is a
many-
dog run. This is just for dogs.
Okay.
All right, I think we've exhausted this line of questioning. No, it's a fair question. Maybe pigs or alpaca, or I don't know.
Who knows, maybe an alligator.
All right. Mr. Weber, would you take us to your next question, please?
Thanks. Let's move on to lighting.
Shall we move back to whatever you skipped?
And yep, that's the lighting.
Lighting.
So if we can go to the top of the page there. Thank you, Ms. Alfonso. And all lighting will be downlit with no daylighter, more than 3,000 Kelvin. The city's DRO has a maximum Kelvin temperature of 3,500. The applicant will have a 3,000 Kelvin. The seating areas will be bordered by planters for a total square footage of the planters of 1,310 square feet, with an array of plants providing a defined space. The pergolas will be illuminated with architectural flush mount downlighting at 10, that's not 10 feet, that's 10 inches mounting height. Oh, no, that's the pergola, yeah, 10-foot mounting height. The 26-inch high planters will have downlit footlight sconces. Lighting along the parapet wall will be downlit wall sconces at 26 inches in height. The bulkheads, including that by the dog run, will have downlit wall sconces at a mounting height of 84 inches, which equals 7 feet. The cooking grill, by the way, if you look at the last sentence of the cooking grill, that will be illuminated by wall sconces at 96-inch mounting height, downlit as well. That was not shown on the architectural plan. The architect asked that that be clarified for the board.
There was a question for your client to confirm.
Well, the questions would be, the lighting will be monitored by, after 10 o'clock by motion sensors.
Correct.
And it will not be on before 7.
Correct.
And not after 10. Motion sensors would trigger any access at that point for the lights to come on. Now,
That's
would
correct.
all of the lights come on, or is it just proposed that the lights at the bulkheads would come on? Bulkheads. Then, if there's no questions with regard to lighting, cooking grill, you have some operational guidelines with regard to the cooking grill. The cooking grill, gas-fired cooking grills with stone counters will be locked and available only upon reservation and certification of training for the residents. During usage, the grills will be monitored either in person or by security camera. After cooking, the grills will be turned off and the gas supply locked. And I indicated that the illumination would be by wall sconces at a 96-inch mounting height. Is that correct?
Correct.
Unless the board has any further questions of Mr. Flanagan with regard to operational guidelines, I would just follow up with a couple of questions.
I just had a fast question about the grills. Are you anticipating piping it into the building or using propane?
Piping it.
Then, you've held a neighborhood meeting, correct?
Correct.
And then you've also gone and talked to one of the neighbors who couldn't make the neighborhood meeting and then couldn't make the March 17th meeting.
Correct.
And you went and spoke with her, and I forget what address that was.
5 Plain Street.
5 Plain Street. And can you tell the... You live at 5 Plain? Then, do you recall a conversation then that you had with the woman who lives at 5 Plain Street, Mr. Flanagan?
Must have been my wife. He has not been identified
Yeah,
or sworn.
we're gonna need to identify and swear him. Do you want to just direct your questions to
I'll
your,
just talk to Mr. Flanagan.
and then we'll welcome you to offer any questions if you'd like.
And Mr.
sir.
Flanagan, when you were there, did you have a conversation with regard to the type of fence when you were proposing the open metal fence that was proposed originally?
Correct. It was a Zoom call, actually, in the morning.
And then you indicated that you would change the fencing to board on board?
Correct.
And the response of the neighbor at 5 Plain Street was?
She was happy about that.
And
Sorry, you gotta
Yep.
wait
Then-
until it's the appropriate time to speak.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So before we jump to the general public, any questions? We're going to move quickly through lighting and grills for perhaps our board professional, Mr. Dower, anything you want to comment on
The only
either
other
there?
question I had is, you mentioned that the lighting after 10 o'clock would be motion sensors for around the bulkhead. Are the residents restricted to going on the roof till 10 o'clock?
Yes.
So is there any thought to have a security so that whatever you have for your, let's say it's a fob that you use to get into your apartment, that same fob you could use to access the roof, other than that it would be locked? So that there'd be some record of somebody going up there in case there was an issue.
That is, yeah, that's planned.
Okay.
Have fob access.
Okay, so then you're restricting it. Obviously, any of the residents can go up there, but if there's an issue, they have a record of who went up there, and they can deal with it however they want to.
Correct.
Mr. Dewar?
Thank you. Mr. Snick, is there anything you care to ask?
Just
Lighting,
regarding the
grills?
fencing, that board-on-board fence, that's along the, I would say that's the easterly property line
Yes.
only, and that the others are an open aluminum fence, I believe?
I'll be
And
calling,
maybe your engineer can clarify
Yep.
that. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll wait for the engineer.
Any questions for this witness? Yep.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I actually had a couple of questions going back to March. With the properties that currently exist on the site, I know there are some rental units. There's also some offices, I believe. But how many rental units currently exist?
There are 10, I believe.
Okay. Do you know how many bedrooms total?
Not off the top of my
Okay.
head, no.
Okay, thank you.
Questions for the applicant from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple more,
Go ahead, Tom.
going back to the last meeting too. Again, I apologize I wasn't here, but I was going to ask some general questions. I know this was discussed with the architect, but I think a better answer comes from the applicant. Obviously, this is new construction. You're proposing to tear down the houses that are there, build, a new structure. You know what the zoning rules are. You revise what the zoning rules are. Speaking for myself, I look a little closer at applications where you're starting from scratch and you have a clean slate, you have full choice of what you're building. I'm wondering, why aren't you building, and I don't know what the number would be, the number of units that would not necessitate some of the bulk variance that you're requesting for? That's one question. I have other questions too, but why are we here with this kind of size when you could have chosen to build a smaller building needing fewer variances?
Well, as we developed the design, we were actually, initially, we were looking for more units, and then we tailored it back, and we really thought that the overall design and the layout of the individual units really worked for this property and also for the model, the business model.
So financial
Yep.
concerns, okay. And maybe that relates to the next question too, and maybe you want to defer this to the planner, but there was some discussion at the last hearing about the neighborhood business zone requirements that there be first floor retail. And obviously, you're not doing that, so that's one of the variances you're asking for. And I would like you to address that because I don't see any rationale in the master plan or the DRO for saying, that we want retail on the first floor in this neighborhood. Why the rationale for you saying, or I think it was your architect or whoever was at the last hearing, saying that it's not needed because it's at the neighboring building, that's where the neighborhood business is. When you're adding all these extra residential units now, you could argue that justifies the need for more neighborhood businesses. So why not have, comply with that requirement of neighborhood business zone?
If I can, Mr. Hugo?
Sure.
That's a very perceptive question, and it's one that goes to the heart of the application. So it's well put by the board member. That is a response that we do have a professional planner who will be coming in to address that. In summary, what we have presented is that by the elimination of the commercial use on the first floor, you then have a stepping toward the floor area ratio, because the intensity that you have with a floor area ratio is not just mass, but it's intensity of use. As soon as you remove the commercial aspect that intensity of use is lost, is gone, is abrogated. So at that point, then, you have a question on the floor area ratio. Will the site accommodate this unit? And that's the question that the board members all have to consider. Will this site accommodate that floor area ratio of 115 when 75 is what's permitted? So that's really where the focus is. In terms of the intensity, one of the points, and there will be testimony, we have exhibits prepared that have anticipated your question, and that's the experience that you have, Mr. Yuko, with so many applications that you bring to bear, is that when we looked at it, and what they looked at was, if you have a compliant, totally compliant 5-unit development, then you keep the driveways. So now you have those existing driveways all contributing to the traffic at that intersection. And each of the properties can then have its own parking lot, its own driveway, its own parking lot, its own driveway, its own parking lot, its own driveway, with a commercial on the first floor, residence above, commercial on the first floor, residence above. And so what you end up with is you're going to have in, out. You're not going to have one continuous. You're going to have in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out on those 5 units. And those 5 units are going to be independent strip mall type units. So you're talking about, instead of a Dunkin' Donuts next door, you're going to be talking about something similar, a Starbucks. You're going to be talking about a pizzeria. You're going to be talking about somebody that competes with the Chinese restaurants in that little business district. And so what we've asked the planner to do is, when you're looking at this, and it'll be Mr. Phillips, recognize that you do have a business district that further into town. And that is something that also, not just the promenade being supported, but that business district as well. So all of that has been brought together, and that's what Mr. Phillips is intended to testify to much better than I can.
Yeah, well, then I'll save my line of questioning for that, but you mentioned having adjoining properties, each with their own separate entrances. It could be like the building next door, where there's only one entrance and exit, and retail on the first floor, so it wouldn't have to be those multiple. We can talk that with the planner if it's better.
Very good.
Questions from the board for this witness? Offer members then of the interested public the opportunity to ask questions of the witness. If there's any statements that need to be made or shared, this is not the time for that. But if there's any members of the interested public, I'm not just looking at you, sir, anyone else that would like to come up and ask a question of this witness, we welcome that at this time.
Now time to talk?
Ask questions only, no statements.
No statements?
No statements. There'll be a time for that.
At the end.
At the end.
No questions.
No questions. Yeah. Ms. Gagnon, or yeah? Want to grab a seat, Mr. Flanagan, you're welcome to. Yep.
Good evening, Karthik Jairam, 11 Plain Street. I wanted to ask one question on parking, but Mr. Flanagan talked about. We didn't talk about like what is the options available for guests of residents who are visiting the building. Are they going to be charged, and who's going to pay the charge for that?
They're not going to be charged.
For any number of hours, days?
No, that's not our plan.
Okay. Regarding the rooftop, there was mention about cooking grills. Do we know like how many grills will be there?
I believe it's 2, right?
2.
2. Okay. And you also mentioned about using for the dog park, people reserving it. Did I understand correctly?
Yes.
Is there like,
We're going to have slots. We're going to have to schedule when they're going to use it.
how would a resident like do that? Like, do they call somebody and say, we want to use it, or is it like a system that you have that you
Yeah,
can?
it'll be through the building manager. There'll be a management system.
All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Mr. Flanagan, would you mind just pulling the microphone closer to you? Sorry, just want to make sure we get your comments.
Hi, Dory Gagnon, 27 Bedford Road. I can't remember if I asked these questions last time because it's been a little while. Do you hire the valet service? Do they work specifically for you, or do you outsourcing the valet service? Are they a bigger company?
They would work for us.
For you 24/7. So if somebody's sick, are you going to have a replacement? Are there a lot of people? Have you guys figured this out?
We currently have a number of valets, probably about 10 or 12, working our other facilities.
Oh, within Summit?
Correct.
Oh, okay, okay. So you described the whole lift system. I'm familiar with it. So when you have a power outage, you can get them down, but like Hurricane Sandy, people were without power for a couple weeks. So let's say they're still living in their buildings and you have to get the cars back up. What would you do then?
As I said, we're not planning on putting a generator in if it was a prolonged power outage. We could look at that. We can put any circuits on a temporary generator, but right now, the game plan is not to put them on a generator.
Okay, so there's no plan B. So, okay, so I'm going on to the dog run. I don't remember how big that dog run that you mentioned is before. How big is the dog run area specifically?
Well, the architect available.
Maybe
Okay.
we could follow it up.
And what is the dog run made of?
It's,
Architect will be available.
Okay. And what is the rooftop made of?
Architect.
Okay. And who manages the property per se? If there's an issue with the rooftop area or outside when it snows and stuff, you guys are specific, or is there somebody else?
yeah, we have a maintenance manager.
Okay, so this goes to my next question. So if there's an issue, how long would it take for somebody to clear that area if there's feces or something on top? And the dog doesn't specifically go in that dog area, but they've now gone in an area where somebody is eating or something and cleaning that. Would that maintenance person, and how long would that usually take for them to clean it?
Well, if I can understand the question, so in the event that there's a dog that has not stayed within the dog run and then has defecated somewhere else,
Correct.
how long would that take to be cleaned up?
Yes.
If you have an answer to that, Mr. Flanagan, then can speculate as to what that would be?
I don't really, I mean, as a maintenance person on staff, they will clean it up when they get the call to clean it up. But
Okay.
the game plan is to have all the dogs in the dog run. That's why we are providing it.
You're gonna have an operations manager at the building at all times who
Yeah.
will probably find out, clean that up.
Okay. And then now that marijuana is legalized, I'm smelling it more and more within the city. How are you going to handle the smoking effect if people are smoking outside on there and then the neighborhood smelling that effect? I think that is very potent when it's on top. Are there plans to handle that?
If I can, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
The management of the facility will be consistent with all laws, regulations, requirements, statutes.
So I think to that question, if smoking is even permitted, I don't believe it would be necessarily. In your experience, Mr. Flanagan, has
No.
smoking been permitted in that kind of outdoor use?
No,
No.
we're going to limit any smoking.
I don't know what the law is
smoking-
now, I'm just know
smoking
that
of
it's-
cigarettes or
Or
marijuana.
marijuana?
So
Okay.
just so here, there'll be no smoking on the rooftop, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're gonna try to limit it, and it's gonna be prohibited in the building. Up on the roof, if it happens, we're gonna, tell them to put it out.
Okay, those are my
So
questions.
are you saying your units are smoke-free?
We're gonna try to, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Conning. Any other questions from members of the interested public? Please, yep.
Good evening, Don Nelson, 20 Plain Street. I live behind the proposed new building and up about half a block. You talked a little bit about the generator. Is there a generator on site or not?
A life safety generator, yes.
When will that be tested?
That will be tested on a weekly or bi-weekly cycle.
Any idea what time? Not 7 o'clock in the morning?
No,
not 4
correct.
o'clock at night?
Correct, we'll make sure that it's.
Good.
I'll just note, it will comply with the ordinance requirements for testing generators, right?
Correct.
Well, not to argue, but landscapers start at 7:30, so, okay. But anyway, another question I had was, as regards to the dog park or the dog run on the top floor. Who would we as neighbors notify, say somebody's up there at 2 o'clock in the morning and their dog's just barking and barking and barking because the person had to run downstairs to go to the bathroom? Who would we notify?
The building manager.
So that number will be posted in the building?
Correct.
Okay. And then parking competition. I notice we talk about parking a lot. Let's say there's a function up on the rooftop and there's not inadequate parking on site. Where do you anticipate the overflow to park?
We have the traffic engineer can also respond to that.
Okay.
But one of the points that they were dealing with on the surface parking was to have the 2 valet spaces.
Mhm.
So that makes sure that there is that availability of parking. To the extent that there is going to be any sort of occasion that a resident is going to have, then it would be expected that the resident would advise the manager of the dependency of that so that they can make the appropriate parking arrangements.
Okay. The reason why I asked that and I speak of parking competition is on Plain Street, we compete with very large car dealership in the neighborhood for parking. And I don't want to see this building exacerbate that parking problem. Okay? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
If the board approves the application, I think that would be an appropriate condition that would be sensitive to the concerns that the Flanagans have conveyed in the development of the site for the Plain Street residents.
So what would be the wording of that condition?
That the scheduling of any event must be scheduled by the resident, must be notified to the manager, and as a result, arrangements made in anticipation of that event. So that the events don't come willy-nilly solutions.
But how are we defining an event? If I've got a 2-bedroom apartment and I have like 10 people over for a party, is that considered an event?
That would be an event. I think that you have a population size there, like you said, any event that triggers more than 5 cars.
How would you enforce that, though? Like, would the building manager knock on your door and kick everyone out? Would you have the police show up and escort everyone out?
Well, at one point, you would have it within the lease itself. After an event like that, then the resident would be advised, and then they would be hopefully understand that it could not happen again. So as an operational regulation, you can certainly put that in the lease. And that then, at that point, exposes the tenant to whatever enforcement the law allows.
Would you go so far, Mr. Weber, as to restrict the size of these occasions, gatherings, as on-site parking would allow? Just sensitive to the Plain Street concern about, I mean, you could theoretically accommodate overflow parking on street, but that in fact is the problem we're trying to avoid.
And the fact that they have 138 parking spaces where 97 are required, that there is that extra capacity so that there should be more than enough room to manage occasions.
David, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have concerns over enforceability. I would wonder if the applicant at his other buildings has had similar operating conditions. Where you had to limit residents' ability to have people over, as it were.
That's not limiting, it's notifying.
Okay, but you got 50 units. Let's say a given Saturday night, 5 to 10 units have a party, that could be a problem.
It shouldn't be. There should, with the additional parking that's available, they should be able to manage that. So it's the fact that they don't give notice is the problem. And then if it turns out that there is a problem, following the chairman's point of view, then there's going to have to be a situation where they say, well, we can't have that because we don't have the sufficient parking. So arrangements will have to be made, Uber, Lyft. So you're going to have to figure out how to get your guests here other than using parking. Or they just carpool in.
Perhaps, but I would ask the applicant, whether you've operated with similar conditions at other buildings you've managed.
Yeah, most of our buildings are within cities, so there's really zero parking for the most part. There's small parking lots, and we do have rules that we do enforce in leases that, and especially this building, we are not looking for, this is not going to be Animal House. This is going to be a high-end building, and we're really going to make sure that everybody's respecting all the different tenants that are in the building. So we're not really looking for a lot of parties, but we would be able to restrict it or at least limit it to areas. And we do have the parking capacity, as Jim mentioned.
And you heard the chairman's point of view that if you find that this is that Saturday night, and there's all of a sudden 10 people saying we want to have all these cars, you say our parking will not accommodate that, that other arrangements will have to be made for your guests to arrive here.
Correct.
And that would be, if the board approves the application, condition of approval.
Mr. Flanagan, is there a direct route from Plain Street to your property?
No.
Okay. I think that answers that.
Other questions for Mr. Flanagan? I believe that's the conclusion of your line of questioning.
It is, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We'd welcome you back if there's need for further follow-up, but otherwise.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flanagan. And Mr. Weber, I'm just watching the clock. It'd be nice to take a break, I don't know, maybe in another half hour, if that sounds amenable to you?
That's fine, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
I would ask that Nancy Doherty be recalled to the stand to continue to give testimony in this matter.
This is commercial.
Hello, Ms. Doherty.
Hello.
Recall that you've been previously sworn,
Yes.
and you've had an opportunity from the last hearing on March 16th.
Jim, do you want to bring the mic over to yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. You've had an opportunity to review the board's comments, the neighbors' comments, and the board's professional from the March 16th hearing, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And as a result, have you revised the plans to respond to those observations?
Yes, we have,
And you-
with a revision date of April 14th.
And you've also drawn clouds, if you will, around some of the changes that you made?
Yes, we have, and we also summarized those changes to the professionals.
All right. If we can start with the rooftop plan, and that would be A9.
Sure. Sure, so starting on sheet A9, I'll sort of go around clockwise for the benefit of the board. So starting on the upper left corner of the plan, as was mentioned, we updated the fencing, and this is bubbled, as Mr. Weber said, there's a sort of cloud there. So the fencing at the dog run is now shown at 6 feet high. It's a black vinyl-coated chain link fence, and it has it has mesh on the side facing Plain Street and the side facing the driveway. So two sides do not have that mesh, and two sides do.
When you're talking about the driveway, you're talking about River Road as mesh, and yet the area that faces the interior of the site will not have mesh.
Correct. Apologies there, yes. Then sort of moving to the right on that note, there is a list of plantings. I know there had been a question about what sort of plantings would be up there, so there is a list of plantings that came through the landscape, through the engineering team. And as was mentioned, there's a total of 1,310 square feet of plantings, of planters on the roof. Going around clockwise to the right, there was a note that was added about...
If we can, just for a second.
Sure.
Ms. Alfonso, do you think you can highlight the cloud or the bubble that Ms. Doherty was referring to in describing the plantings that are proposed there?
I might be able to.
You don't think so?
I may be able to. Give me a moment. You see the green?
See the green, any ability to get it so we can read it? Nope. So, very good. Thank you, Ms. Alfonso. So you were testifying, Ms. Doherty, as to the 6-foot-high black vinyl coated chain link fence at the dog, and that provides black mesh on the sides facing Plain Street and the parking lot. You were referring to the parking lot, that's River Road.
Correct.
And then on the planter details, you've listed plants there,
That is correct.
and that's where you indicate that the total area is 1,310 square feet.
Correct.
What type of plants are being proposed?
Okay, I don't have those right in front of me, and I definitely cannot read that. And I may not be able to read it even, here we go. So it's a combination of, and I apologize, I'm not going to be able to read all the Latin names here. So Blue Fortune, we've got some Aurea, we've got Blue-Green Independence, Aquaflora, and again, I apologize, this is not my area of expertise here, just in terms of these names. Imperial Gem, we've got some Harry Lauder's Walking Stick, that sounds like a nice one, and some daffodils, and some mops. So a combination of those, and it describes sort of the size of those containers for those plants.
And we see that some of the plants are going in at 18 to 34 inches, 24 to 30 inches, 15 to 18 inches. There's lavender, there's reed grass, sedges, and that's all going to provide a certain amount of defined space that you're looking for on the rooftop amenity for the seating areas.
Correct.
I'm sorry for interrupting on that. Then with regard to A9, that also describes the lighting fixtures, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So if we could, thank you, Ms. Alfonso, if you could go to the top of that so we can see the lighting fixtures.
Sure. Okay. So we have, in conjunction with the civil engineering set, which on sheet A also has a lighting schedule for the sort of civil engineering aspect of the lighting. These are all the light fixtures, the architectural fixtures. So the first one is fixture type D, which is located around the perimeter of the building. And all of the heights of those D fixtures above the grade are listed on the elevations.
Oh, just for now, just on the rooftop, which are the fixtures that are proposed on the rooftop?
Okay, starting with fixture type G, which is the third one from the left.
If we could, thank you, Ms. Alfonso.
Okay, so type G is the security lighting that goes above the appurtenances. Those are basically, those are required, code required lights. They are all shielded. As was mentioned, everything is 3,000 K. So that will be the maximum, or that will be the temperature of all of the light fixtures. These will be mounted at 8 feet, and they have an output of 1,900 lumens. The next fixture, if you go to the next fixture to the right, that is fixture type H. And those are the fixtures that will be either mounted on the side of the planters or on the parapet wall around the perimeter of the rooftop. There's lots of those fixtures. They have a low output, and they're relatively small fixtures. They will be mounted no higher than 26 inches above the roof surface, and they basically cast light down, and they are, as I mentioned, installed around the perimeter of all of the walking areas of the roof and where the planters are located. Those are the types of fixtures that are on the roof. And then in addition, excuse me, there's one more, which is fixture type K. So it's all the way on the right. So those are the downlights, and those will be mounted in the trellis, in between the structure of the trellis. So the trellis has a total, the horizontal members are 12 inches tall, and these fixtures are about 9.5 inches high. And so those fixtures will be installed within the framing of the trellis, so they will not be visible, and they point straight down. So those are the extent of the fixtures on the roof itself. Do we want to go to the rest of the fixtures on here?
Well, I think we have a little bit of a discrepancy. I'm looking at the plans, which are revised to April 14th, 2022 at 9. And when I look at the bulkheads, I see that the wall sconce that's proposed at the bulkhead.
Oh, my apologies.
J.
Yes, my apologies.
J has a height of 84 inches, which is consistent with what is proposed as part of the operational.
Yes, you are absolutely correct, and my apologies. The security lights are actually the lights that are down on the lower level at grade, and we are using those J fixtures as the lighting up on the balcony. So my apologies, and thank you for the correction.
Then, we talked about, now some of the questions, as we're going through the dog run, one of the questions that was asked by the neighbor from Belford was, what's the material on the surface for the dog run?
So as was described by Mr. Flanagan, it is a specific sort of, I'll call it sort of astroturf. I don't think that's the right term for it, but it is something that you can have drainage through it, and it can be, it's a scrubbable surface. So it's sort of a mat that goes down on top of the roof surface. I know there was a question about other materials on the roof, so there will be sort of raised concrete pavers in the accessible portions of the roof. The roof, I think, which I testified before, has a membrane roof on it in the inaccessible areas. And then it has raised concrete pavers where the seating areas, which are demonstrated on this roof plan, where you see sort of the checkerboard pattern, that will be a contrasting, again, paver material. So that's the walking surface where people can access the roof.
And that would explain why in the planters, and if we can go to the bottom of the page, Ms. Alfonso, and zoom in. And we see horizontal lines connecting the planters. That's designed to restrict the access to the area that is not available as an amenity.
That is correct.
So the residents, as occupying the space, are not going to be allowed to go beyond that area.
That is correct.
All right. Now, there was a question that was raised by Mr. Dewar, or I think it was Mr. Dewar, but there was a question raised by the board professional indicating that with regard to the solar field, if we can go to those clouds there, Ms. Alfonso. And then what changes have you made there, Ms. Doherty?
So we have changed for the solar field, for the area for the future solar, where you see the dotted, the dashed line. It will be a 4-foot-high board-on-board fence, and we've included some additional notes in terms of what will be installed when the project is completed. And so the pre-wiring and the transfer switch, et cetera, will be, anything that's required will be sort of within that fenced-in area for where the solar field is indicated. And the sort of backbone, the electrical service to get it up to the roof will be installed when the project is built.
And I had indicated in my opening, and perhaps we can go to A10 at this point, unless there's any questions, Mr. Chairman, with regard to the rooftop. We're going to go to the size of the bulkheads.
I think there was a question just to confirm the size of the dog run. Oh, sure. Yep, the actual area of the dog run itself is 32 feet by 38 feet is the square footage, the dimensions, excuse me. 32 by what? 38, yep.
And then I think you wanted to talk about the comment that I had made in the opening about reducing the square footage of the bulkheads?
Sure, yes. So as was mentioned, originally there was 590 square feet of the appurtenance that has the 2 elevators and the stair bulkhead. So it's the, I don't know if you can zoom into that.
Would it be better for the board, because you did put a cloud on this on A10?
Sure, we can go to A10. So A10, if you look at the top of the sheet, there is a cloud there. So you can see now there's a portion on the right, or to the right-hand side of that appurtenance where the dimension of 15 feet is. We have now reduced that area that is 15 feet above the roof to a total of 100 square feet. It originally was 590 square feet, so we've taken 490 of those square feet and brought them down to 11 feet above the roof, and only that 100 square feet will remain at 15 feet. And the reason for that is the overrun for the elevator. That is a code requirement, and we're required to have those elevators to the roof.
And how high off the parapet will be the area that's been eliminated from being 15 feet? You've moved it down to 11. How high will it be above the parapet?
7 feet above the parapet.
And then with regard to the 100 feet that you still have to maintain the code, how high will that be above the parapet?
That will be 11 feet.
And when you say that the reduced area was 7 feet, it's actually 7 feet 6 inches
The reduced area,
above the parapet.
yes, excuse me.
And then with regard to the massing of the surrounding buildings on Morris Avenue, have you prepared exhibits with regard to that?
We have,
And can we turn to those exhibits?
sure. We'll start with 14.1. Okay, so this is A-14.1, and this is just illustrating the S3 building from the BMS campus. And just for point of reference, that building is 3 stories in height and has a gross floor area of approximately 112,000 square feet.
And where is that relative to the property that's currently before the board?
So this is directly across the street on the other side of Morris Avenue, slightly to the east of where our building is.
And just for the record, when were these photographs taken? This is an active construction site, so.
The photographs were taken within the past month, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
And they fairly represent the condition of this property as it exists today?
Yes.
The first hearing, thank you.
Okay, so that is a 14.1. If we want to go to the next sheet.
Just before
yeah.
we're off S3, you said, what was the square footage of S3?
112,000
And
approximately.
what's the square footage of Turcano Park?
56,
So it's twice as big?
correct, just about twice as big. So on A14-2, this is showing Sunrise, the assisted living, which is on the far corner of Morris and River. So Sunrise is 3 stories in height, and its gross floor area is approximately 64,000 square feet. So Sunrise is also just a little bit bigger than our project, so about by 8,000, 9,000 square feet. So that is a 14.2.
Jim, is this A5?
So, yes. Oh, my apologies.
Just wanted to make sure.